Good morning. Thanks. Took you a second, but you got there. Good job. I am really excited about our talk this morning. I'm actually not involved, which is another reason why I'm really excited about it. But I wanted to kind of give an intro for what we're going to be talking about, and also talk about some current stuff going on in the news that is just something we need to be thinking about as a university community. So in a little bit, we're going to be hearing from a panel of Multnomah University alum. And they have come back, which is really awesome, to talk to you all a little bit about their experience. And I think a common thread that you may hear throughout their stories is this commonality of their desire to find belonging in our community. As a community, we all, as individuals, we all desire belonging. That is something that is innate within all of us. I believe that's the way God made humans, is to desire belonging. I think God intended that, so we understand our belonging to Him, but then He gives us each other to help physically represent the belonging that we have with Him as we learn to love one another better and be a part of a Christ-centered community together. And recently in the news, there's been some stories about other universities in our country that have been found in violation of some of the federal laws prohibiting acts of hazing. And I want to just talk for a quick minute about what that means, what hazing looks like. I think it's often easy to, when we think of the word hazing, we think of some of these extreme cases where people are like duct taped to things and beaten or stripped and made to run around, or I don't know, just crazy things that are often alcohol-induced or related to maybe the Greek system, fraternities and sororities, or big state university athletic teams. And I think it's easy to assume, because of the stories that we hear in the news, that those things would never happen here. That kind of stuff isn't a part of the Multnomah community. But I want for a minute for us to think a little more deeply about this concept of what hazing actually is in a way that maybe does personalize it a little bit more here to our community. Hazing often stems from a place of tradition. And traditions are good, right? The intent of tradition often is to bring people together, is to actually create opportunities for deeper belonging in community. Multnomah itself actually has several long-standing, I shouldn't say long-standing, has maybe had in the past some traditions that were designed to create community. Things like, and I've heard stories, I wasn't around for any of these, things like taking newly engaged couples kind of through like a gauntlet of public activities that they had to do, as a, hey, you got engaged, now you have to do all these things. Or maybe if you're involved or living in a certain living area on campus, you have to participate in some event just because of the nature of you live here, so therefore you're a part of this thing that we do together as being members of this community together. Things like that are often fun and good-natured and designed to encourage community can often result in harmful behaviors and in destruction of community if people feel pressured or violated or not given a choice to participate or not. Social pressure and these kind of traditions can be huge, and it can be really problematic. And within our community, we define those types of activities actually as hazing-like behaviors. Things where people are basically told that in order to be a part of a group, you have to do something. You have to participate in this event. You have to behave in a certain way. And those types of expectations are not acceptable or appropriate within our community because they actually tear community down. They don't build it up. And so they don't actually enhance what it is that we're trying to do here at Multnomah. So I just want to make sure that we all have a broader understanding. And please know, I'm not saying this because these things have been happening here at Multnomah. So if you're wondering, something going on that we don't know about, nope, not at all. It's just this stuff has been in the news lately. And it is important. It's something we really highly value here. because we're committed to fair and equal treatment of all students and the safety of our entire student body. And that means that we take stuff like this really seriously. We have a zero tolerance policy for any hazing-like behaviors. And so please know that if you're a part of a group, you're a part of that group because of the nature of the fact that you belong, not because you have to do anything to prove that you're a part of it. Now, obviously, with athletic teams, you have to try out and things like that. That's not hazing. That's not what I'm talking about. We're good there. But when it comes to a social group or belonging on a residence hall floor or something like that, there are not expectations except you to be there and to be involved as much or as little as you want to be. Tradition should never divide or exclude, but rather serve to deepen the connection between the members of the community. And as we at Multnomah continue to develop new traditions, we are committed to developing traditions and events that really fosters this idea that we're talking a lot in chapel this year, to love God and to love people, and creating events that are inclusive, uplifting, and beneficial to our whole community. So I just wanted to put that out there. Keeping that in mind as you hear our stories from our panelists today, and as you go into the rest of the year, and as you're just kind of finding your way and finding different groups to be a part of, this is our expectation and our hope for our community, is that we can be a safe and inclusive one. Thanks. And with that, I'm going to invite up Christy Martin.
Good morning. My name is Christy Martin. I'm the Associate Dean of Student Success here at Multnomah. These are alumni. I'm very excited that they are here.
You guys switch for order.
We're going to introduce all of them in a minute. What this chapel is about, it's called Backgrounds Chapel, right? So the idea came from a lot of students who've come into my office and said, man, when I first got here, I thought there is no way there is anyone here at Multnomah who's like me, and I don't know how I'm ever going to connect with anyone or ever going to fit in. And then eventually, they ended up finding some sense of belonging, and they ended up connecting with some people. That's not to say, oh, they found people who were exactly like them. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But they found people that they felt safe, that they could be vulnerable with. And that's really where the connection comes. So all of these folks are people that I know and love, and who I've heard some of their story. And I felt like they connected with the theme of this chapel, and they were gracious enough to come and share their stories with you guys. So first off, we're going to go through and just introduce everybody. So if each of you, we'll start with Garrett. If each of you could just introduce yourself, your name, how long you've been out of school, and what you're currently doing. And I might go by and adjust microphones if needed.
Cool. Hi, Garrett Williams. I graduated last spring, so I'm really fresh out of the cradle kind of thing. I just recently moved to Portland, and I took my Bible and theology degree, and I took it to Olive Garden, so I kind of serve bread and wine and kind of sprinkle the cheese like manna, and so that's kind of what I'm doing with my degree. So.
Thank you.
I'm Kenzie Halbert Howen. I graduated in 2013, 4 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Is that all? Oh, what I'm doing now.
What are you doing?
I do freelance writing and editing.
I'm Emily Yaton. I graduated in 2012, 5 years ago, and I work for Multnomah County Library. I am not quite a librarian yet, but 90%.
Mostly a librarian.
And I'm Zach Munoz, and I graduated, a year ago, last fall, I think. It might not have been, maybe 2 falls ago. And I currently manage the finances and faculty relations for the University of Portland.
Nice. Thank you. So we're just going to dive in. They've been gracious enough to tell me that they would share their stories or parts of their stories. So we're just going to go down the line and hear their stories. And at the end, I'm going to wrap up, kind of talk about some themes, and close this up. But Zach, if you wouldn't mind starting,
Sure.
Go for it.
Cool. So my theme I guess I want to address is the theme of pain. And for me, that pain kind of took an unhealthy turn that pushed me towards a shameful aspect of my community. My first semester at Multnomah, my father passed away during finals week. And as a result, my family was really angry with me and felt that my father had died because of the strain on our relationship and has since then alienated me from the family. I actually spoke to my grandmother for the first time in 5 years a few weeks ago. My next semester, in February, my grandmother, who raised me, passed away. My mother's been in prison for most of my life, so I didn't really get to engage her as a mother. And so for me, my father and then my family left me, and then my mother died, and I was really confused. I came to Multnomah excited to be here and to have this community. But I had this unique challenge now because I really gauged my relationship with the Lord based off of who my father was. I knew that God loved me because my father didn't. I knew God wouldn't hurt me because my father did. I knew God accepted me because my father didn't. And so when my dad died, it really offset the scales, and I had to figure out how to balance it. And so I put myself on the other side. I became homeless. I spent my sophomore, junior year sleeping in the back of my truck. Most of you don't know the A-frame, or you do, but you haven't been there. It was actually on the back side. There was a tree, and the tree would hang just right to keep the light from the pole out there from shining in, and it also kept a bit of the rain off of me. I also began to reject my own community. My community, my friends didn't even know that I was homeless for those 2 years. And I did that because I was ashamed. I was ashamed because, my father hated me. My family hated me. And if I must have done something wrong to deserve that. I must have been this horrible person for my own family to hate me. So why would my friends care? These people that some of them I had just met. And from there, I began to self-abuse even more. I became an alcoholic. I spent those 2 years drinking. I stopped feeding myself. I would often go weeks without eating. And all this time, I refused to reach out for help because I was ashamed. I was ashamed because of this pain in my life that I wouldn't be accepted by my friends. And it really kind of shifted the moment that I asked for help. I had been tired of sleeping out there in the rain and the cold. My truck wasn't weatherproof, and so I would often wake up in these puddles of water. And one day I saw Lisa Hesmahulch. If you don't know her, she's a great person. We were actually right out here, and I walked up and I was frustrated, and I said, "Lisa, I'm homeless and I don't know what to do." And as she sat there and listened to my story, we parted ways later. And it was from there when I reached out for help, when I reached out for some community that God met me in that place. Then a couple days later, I was in class. It was in history and poetry with Ray Lubeck, and he came up and he said, "Hey, Zach, I'd like to talk to you in my office." And I was like, "Yeah, whatever, okay." And so we get in his office, and he says, "Zach, I hear you're homeless and that you're having a hard time, and I'd like to invite you to live with me and my family." And because of the shame that I had felt, I actually cussed him out, and I yelled at him, and I said, "How dare you?" I said, "I'm not your charity case. I don't need your help." And I just yelled at him for a good 10 minutes, and I said, "Why? Why are you reaching out to me?" And he said, "Because I love you, and I think it's what Jesus would do." And I just busted out in tears, and I ran out of the room, and I met up with a friend, and he said, "So are you going to do it?" And I said, "Nah, forget that guy. I don't need his help." And so a couple days later, another friend, same thing. "Hey, man, I really think you should accept Raise Love." And I said, "No, I don't need that." And he said, "No, I think you really need it." And so I went up to Ray and I said, "Hey, if the offer's still there, I'd really like that." And so I remember the first day I got to his house, his wife Tamara was there, and it had been about 2 weeks since I had eaten, and she comes in and she says, "Hey, can I make you something to eat?" And I said, No, I'm good. If I get hungry, I'll make it myself." And she said, No, it's what a mother does. You see, because I had lost my grandmother and my own biological mother had been in prison most of my life, that connection really hadn't been there. And it's really stuck with me, that idea of, no, it's what a mother does. And so from there, I hadn't fully accepted the Lord back in my life. I started going to counseling. I engaged more with Lisa and these other people. I still hadn't told my entire community that I was homeless. because I was still afraid that I wouldn't be accepted by them, that they would push me away, that they would continue to shame me in this. And it wasn't really until I was sleeping out here in the JCA on the red couch that I woke up and there's all these people around, and I'm like, man, what are these people doing here? I'm trying to sleep. And it was new student orientation. I was like, oh, this is weird. And I look up, and Dr. Josberger, she kind of beckons me over, and she says, how come you're not in my Hebrew class? And I was like, I don't know, I just don't have time. And she said, yeah, that's what everyone says. I'd like to see you in my class this semester. So I thought, sure, why not? And so I signed up for the class, and my intention in the class wasn't to know God more. It wasn't to engage the scriptures more, to be more knowledgeable. It was to prove that as somebody who didn't accept God's love, that I could do better with the Hebrew scriptures than God's own people could. And so I studied hard, and I finished that semester top of my class. I engaged the next semester with the same intention, still angry at God, angry at myself. And we were reading the Ten Commandments, and I'm sure most of you look at the Ten Commandments and you're like, that sucks. That's the part that I don't like to look at. And we were going through it, and God met me in this crazy way. We were reading the first commandment, and you all know it says, you shall have no other gods before me. And in reading it in Hebrew, something clicked. And there was this moment where God just hit me, and he said, I want this to be a face-to-face relationship. I am your God. And I just start bawling in class. And I talked to Josberger about a year ago, and she said, yeah, I remember that day. You were sitting there crying, and I was like, we're not even at the good part yet. And it was this crazy moment where God straight up met me in the scriptures in this crazy way, and I was able to finally come back to him because I had reached out. I think God does have these miraculous moments where he sends somebody in this crazy way who has no idea what's going on, and they provide exactly what you need in that moment. Those moments are real. But there are also those moments where you need to reach out, and you need to accept love. You need to accept some community. And so don't be like me where, I'm homeless and I'm an alcoholic and I'm hating myself before you decide to reach out. Community is here. People care about you, and they want to engage you. And I look out, and it hasn't been so long that I don't know some of the faces, and some faces have come back, and some faces are still here. And like Garrett will say, these are my people. You guys love me, and you are my community. And it's because, in many ways, that God has used you in my life to bring me to where I am. Reach out. Community's there.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks.
We all decided to let Zach go first, which might have been a mistake. So I came to Multnomah in 2009, just fresh out of high school, and I have, for longer than I can remember, been a very anxious person. And moving away from home felt like a huge step for me to take in my faith. And I moved here about a year after I'd lost my mom, and that was really sudden, and it kind of made moving away easier because it felt like there was something that had been tying me to home that wasn't there anymore. But even that being said, one of the super fun things that my anxiety does is that if I feel uncomfortable or I feel like I'm in a new situation, that kind of makes me feel like I've done something wrong. And even though my family was totally supportive of me coming to Multnomah, nobody was telling me that was a bad thing to do, I still felt like when I got here, like, oh, I'm feeling homesick, and I'm feeling like I'm not connecting with people. That must be because I've done something wrong. And especially because leaving my dad alone after all of that was really difficult. But I got here, and I had the biggest security blanket in the world, which was that my best friend, we'd been best friends since we were 8, moved here with me. We were roommates. So I had her right there with me the whole way. But when she came here, she was only here for a year. When she came here, it was with the idea that she wanted to start over. She wasn't going to miss anything about where we grew up. She wasn't going to miss friends. She wasn't going to miss her family. She just wanted to get out and wanted to start over. And so when I tried to talk to her about feeling like I missed home, or like I didn't want to completely start blank with all of these new people, it just didn't land with her. And that was okay. That's not her experience. But it made me feel like a crazy person for feeling that way at all. And it wasn't like I didn't think that it would get better. I knew that it would. I knew that my time here would be really formative for me. I knew I would meet people that I would probably be friends with for the rest of my life. I knew that I would learn things. I would grow in my faith in ways that would change me. And I was excited about all of that, but I just couldn't engage with it for a while when I started. And it wasn't really until, I mean, it took a few months. It took quite a while for me to kind of settle in and start to feel like I knew enough people and I had an idea of what my classes were going to be like, and kind of got to know the environment, and that was really helpful. But it also took definitely some people really intentionally coming after me and telling me that they wanted me to be here, and that I had a place. One of those people was my RA, who graduated, I think maybe a year or two after I was in here. And she was amazing. She would just let me come into her room. I came into her room like every night for a while, and just would rant to her, and would just sometimes just like sit in her room and read and feel like I, had someone who was just totally guaranteed to be kind to me and to make me feel like she wanted to be around me and she wanted to be with me. And I did make friends. I think it was hard I can relate to a little bit of what Zach is saying, and just not wanting to be open with people because you don't think that they're gonna accept you where you're at. My experience with that is pretty different, but it was still that sense of, well, if I'm honest about what I'm feeling, or if I'm really forthcoming about how hard this is for me, then nobody's going to relate to that. And I think especially because I came from the church that I was at growing up. Tons of our pastors came here, went here for seminary. And they were all telling me that, this is a welcoming place, and this is a place where you're going to connect with people and all of that. And I believed them. But I still got here and felt like, okay, this is a huge step of faith for me to come here at all. And when I looked around, there were all of these people who were doing, one of the first, I think it was orientation weekend, one of the first people I met was talking about a charity that she had started for soldiers who were overseas, and doing all this work with them, and people who had done missions all over the world and all these things. I'm like, okay, all of these people have taken what are objectively much bigger steps of faith than what I have done. And it, again, makes me feel like a crazy person for feeling like this is a big deal at all. But the longer I was here and the more people I met, even people who I wouldn't have expected to get along with or connect with, it turned out that when you're all coming together, I think that's one of the beautiful things about Multnomah. When you're all coming here to learn about God and to study the Bible, you have common ground and you have ways to connect with each other that are much deeper than where you're from or the kinds of experiences that you have had. Obviously, that's still a big way to connect with people, but there's ways to connect with people that that we all share, that we can all take advantage of and get to know one another and love one another. And when everyone is trying to love one another the way that Jesus loves us, you have so much more freedom to seem like a crazy person. I think that was the big shift for me, was realizing that and making friends who loved me and didn't think twice about me being me finding things difficult that other people didn't. That wasn't a roadblock. That was fine. And that was kind of a game changer for me. I think that's about it.
Thank you, Emily.
Okay, yeah, so I, like a lot of people who come to Multnomah, grew up in the church. My dad was a senior pastor of the same church my whole life. And when I graduated from high school, I was just angry. You know, like regular pastor's kid anger stuff. And nothing big, but just like, I don't want to be a part of the church anymore. And I walked away from the church pretty decidedly after I graduated from high school and just, you know, made a series of poor choices. But I also grew up in a place where people didn't ever leave. I'm still the only person from my high school friend group who ever left. And I was going to a big, you know, state school in Idaho where I'm from, and I had a full ride athletic scholarship, and it was like, this is good, like stuff is working out, it's fine, like I don't need God, I don't need the church. And I was so surprised by how unsettled and angry I still was, even like, no, I left the church, that was the thing that was making me upset. Why do I still feel like this? And I met up with an old youth pastor who kind of just said, like, I think you need to change. Like, he didn't push me towards going to a Christian school or anything, but he's like, I think you need to change. And even though I was angry at the church when I left, I still like had a lot of belonging when I was in youth group, and so that was like my context. I was like, maybe I should be around Christians. So I Googled Bible College, not Idaho, and Multnomah was the first thing that popped up. And my parents were thrilled about it, like, yes, great, go. And I just kind of showed up, not really knowing, but I did know that when I got here, I was like, okay, no one is gonna like me here because I, like, you know, I've been living the life that I've been living, and I knew that, like, if I'm honest with anybody about where I've been, they're gonna, like, not be cool with it. And I like would joke to my friends back home, I'm like, it's probably gonna be a lot of homeschool people, I'm not gonna have anything in common, it's gonna be very weird. And I kind of just like went in being like, I'll just like keep it, everything under wraps, like play the good Christian, because I do know how to do that. I grew up in the church, and I'll just get my degree, it'll be fine. And I was really lucky to get an awesome roommate my freshman year who like is so kind, and so like, she kind of just said hi to me, and I was like, okay, but this is who I am, and like just like opened up to her immediately. And she was just like, had a very different story than me, but like was just one of those people that makes other people feel very comfortable and feel very like okay and safe. And she did that for me immediately. And I was like, but don't tell anyone because I'm gonna keep this pretty secret. And I was lucky enough to have her kind of giving me courage along the way, but also I was in a dorm section that became pretty tight-knit immediately. My RA she's like, you can't ignore her. She's like a big personality and like so wonderful. And she really modeled vulnerability for me that year. We had a dorm section retreat, and she was just like, sat around a fire. She's like, you're all gonna just tell your story. And I was like, yeah, pass. But Emily told her story, and Amy told her story, and kind of gave me the courage to do that. And hear this group of women who I just told, you know, all my stuff to, and they just hugged me and loved me. And I was like, who are these people? What's going on? But that whole dorm section, we grew really close, and I kind of just leaned into it because I didn't really have anything else. And yeah, I met my best friends in that dorm. I'm like, it's gonna be fine. They're right here, my best friends, giving me courage to do this talk. But yeah, I met my best friends, and because of the way my RA was with me, I wanted to be an RA, and I really leaned into that community that is built in Res Life, and I was an RA for the rest of my time at Multnomah, and like learned just so much about myself, and learned that I'm like, gosh, following Zach, I'm like, you got me on. No, it was good. I'm just in a space. Okay. So yeah, I learned so much about what it's like to have Christian community. And like Emily said, like all these things I was so afraid of, like people are not going to accept me. Like I never experienced all those things I was so afraid of. I just like, people just met me with grace and the love of Jesus. And it was confusing. And like, I think I still resisted it for like at least that full year. And I was like, this is not going to last. Like this is sort of like a thing we do when we're all like being nice Christians, but like when we really get to know each other, that's going to change. And it didn't. It's been hard. Like the friendships I've built here are very deep, and they've been through hard times, but they're strong and good. And my friends that I met here are not exactly like me. We have very different stories, but we continue to walk with each other in life, like 4 or 5 years later. And I think that's mostly what I want to say. But it's just to say that I was so sure that I was going to be like an outcast. And that just wasn't at all my experience. But it did take, like both of you have said, like people reached out to me, which was invaluable. But like I had to make a choice to lean into it. Like especially like I think about how being an RA changed so much for me and built so many strong relationships, but like I had to take that step. Like it wasn't just like, oh, I'm an RA now. Like, but I chose to like lean into res life and like get as involved as I could. And I just wanted to soak up every second of it because of how impactful it was for me, and it was invaluable. That's
Thank
what
you,
I wanna say.
Kenzie.
So I transferred here last year, and it was my first and last year at Multnomah. And coming in, I had to find a new community, a new identity, a new place I belonged, and the purpose I served for Multnomah. And so that was kind of hard at first. And it didn't make it easy that I wasn't in like Memorial or anything. I pledged to Scruggs Delta Delta. And I was pretty alone out there, and I didn't have the lunch plan or anything, so I wasn't getting a constant feeding. And I was on the basketball team, and that kind of was my initial community, but I didn't want that to be my identity, and I didn't want that to be the only place I belong. And I think a lot of us athletes feel that way, is that we're seen as student athletes, and it's easy to behave a certain way because it's already put on us. And that's a book I read from here, is like Leadership and Self-Deception. It's easy to be what you want me to be, and that I don't have to work hard and change your perception of me. And so I'm going to slack off in class. I'm going to sit in the back of chapel. I'm going to be late, and I'm going to act like I don't care, but like really that's not me. And not exploring past that community and settling into that, I kind of fell into a depression when the seasons changed. And that was I've been out here, I've been to other Portland schools, and the rain has never did that to me. But, without that community, without having lunch with people, just sitting in my room, like I went through a depression, and I lost my joy for the Lord, and I would sleep in and miss classes. And the longer I could sleep was the less of the day I had to walk around and act like I was alive, kind of thing. And so that's really hard, and I just want you to be careful of that. And so what brought me out of that was I started going to lunch and started eating with people. But the thing is I was reading before this, I was reading through John 17, and I was, the Bible talks about the body, and, Jesus prays in John 17 talking about, I hope they are one as I am one with you. And we talk about the body, and the picture of the body is so beautiful, but then we get worried about who's the hands and who's the feet and who's the eyes and who's the ears and who's the athletes and who's not and who's top of their class. And that kind of divides people. That starts to divide people and put layers and things. And what I discovered that opened all of that is when I got past whether I was the foot or the ear or, the nostril hair. I was the image of God in me, and you have the image of God in you. And I'm like, wow, we have that connection. We could talk about passions and hurts, and we could talk about all these other things. And so when we connect on a eternal level, and when it's recorded in heaven, like we had that close communion because we talked about what was real to us. My identity wasn't only basketball, because, when I come back and people are excited to see me, I don't think it was because of basketball, because they didn't see me out there a whole lot. But I'm gonna be honest. So like coming back, my identity wasn't this athlete, because if it was all rested on that, then I failed that identity, and it was broken, and it wasn't very good, and people wouldn't have a reason to like me. But because I blew past my label or my part of the body, I guess I would say, and I got into like, I'm an image of God, I'm a human, you're an image of God, you're a human, and we connected on that level, like people like me for that, like for my passions and for my love and for one another. And so I just want to share that with you. And, be careful, like seek that community, because you can go into the shame and you could go into the anxiety and you could go into the, like, I'm not sure because I'm this way that they wouldn't like me for who I am. And, I don't have an identity or a community yet, because it does show. You can't hide it forever. There's that frustration and that hole that needs to be filled with the Jesus we are for one another and the love we are for one another. And it showed up in my classes. We got Gurney back here. He could tell you, like, some days I was super engaged and some days I wasn't. And, just whether my joy was there or not. And it was robbed because of the lack of community and identity I had. And so I needed that from one another. And so the further I opened myself up to being real and to having this image of God, which just shows the capacity to love and the capacity to feel and the capacity to have relationships, that's where everything started growing. I met people outside of the basketball program, and I ate with other tables outside the basketball program, but then the basketball program became so much more to me. When we didn't relate on just basketball only and how good everyone else was doing, when we related on, I had 2 roommates that were basketball players, and when we were able to be everything but basketball, like, it was so much more to me. It meant so much more to me. And the connections I made with my teammates were better when they were necessarily about basketball, because that put divisions between us. That put, like, how's your stats or how's your playing time, and that kind of thing divided us, and it couldn't all be equal. But where we were all equal is just the love for one another and the capacity to be there for one another and share life with one another. And so that's what I got from Multnomah, and that's what I walk away with, is that, like, I wasn't the athlete I wanted to be, and I wasn't necessarily the student I wanted to be either. But the person I got to be and the person I got to show everyone is just, like, full of love, and I want to see the best out of you and you want to see the best out of me, but I understand when you hurt and when I hurt and when you fail and I fail, and I want to be there for you and I want to hug you. And kind of been known for my hugs now, and that's just because that's not a basketball stat, that's just who I am. And so through that, through just really going past the image of God and going past my first take of me, which is a student athlete, and just going past all that and going deeper and deeper into what Christ has in store for each and every one of us, that's what's really opened up this community for me. And that's where I got the most out of Multnomah, was just the community and the people I loved and the people I spent time with and shared moments and laughs. And that can only be done through the image of God that's created that in me. That was nothing from basketball, and that was nothing from my grades, but the image and the life that was put into me.
Thank you. Thank you, Garrett. Give a round of applause for our panelists here. Thank you so much, you guys, for sharing. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And I feel like everybody's stories, there's a lot of us in this room, like, we're all different, right? Everybody's story is different. But the places we can find commonalities, and then the places that we can just love each other despite our differences, is so important. And the fact that you guys were able to experience that and walk away with that, I hope is encouraging to you guys. It's encouraging to me. I hope that one of the themes you heard here was vulnerability. Everybody had to step out of themselves and be vulnerable. But before they did that, they had to believe that they were in a safe place, right? That's kind of what I heard. Like, the people that drew you out were people that showed you they were going to be safe people. And then you were willing to take that step and put yourself out there. I kind of just want to wrap this up by just a couple of thoughts on that topic. Our theme this year is love God and love people, right? Jesus said the greatest command is love the Lord your God, and the second one is like it, love your neighbor. The Greek implies the second one is just like it. It's just like the first command. We're to love people. We can't love God if we're not loving people. I find that sometimes we're more tolerant and patient as Christians with people who aren't Christians, because we don't expect them to have the same belief system and the same values and the same behaviors as we do. But once we're in our own community, sometimes that patience and tolerance can get pretty thin. The So it's like, well, I'm a Christian. You say you're a Christian. Why are you doing this thing, right? Why are you doing that thing? One of the first principles to like navigating healthy relationships is that you have to be able to love yourself. Because if you don't find yourself valuable, if you're not able to develop love for yourself, then you can't engage in healthy ways with other people. I think that's the same is true for a community. We've got to be able to love ourselves before we're going to be able to love other people really well, right? But it's challenging. It's not always easy. I'm sticking to my notes because I don't want to miss something that I wanted to say. So how do we do that? Like, how do we be loving? We've got to signal to people that we're safe people to be vulnerable with. But what's more important than signaling to someone that you're a safe person is actually being a safe person, right? Being a safe person for other people to be vulnerable with. So what does it look like to be a safe person to be vulnerable with? Maybe you listen a lot before you draw any conclusions or say anything. Maybe you don't immediately invalidate someone else's feelings or experience. This was such a formative conversation for me, and some of you have heard this, but because I tell it a lot. That's how important it was to me. But I was at lunch with a pastor, a worship pastor that I used to be under. She's a middle-aged African-American woman, and we were talking about race, and she said she was telling me about an experience she had. She went out to lunch with her roommate. Her roommate is a middle-aged white woman. They've been roommates for years and years and years, and they're both awesome. And they went out to lunch together, and the pastor, my pastor friend, said she felt like she was passed over by the waitress who was serving, and she told her roommate, I think she just skipped me because I'm black. And her roommate said, who wasn't paying very much attention, by the way, said, no, that didn't happen. And my pastor friend explained to me when she just immediately invalidated her potential experience, not only is she now trying to sift through, was I just a victim of racism, but now she also has to defend the fact that maybe that actually happened to her. Like, no, it's possible. Now I have to explain to you how this is possible, you know? And it adds a whole nother layer because she was just, her experience and her feelings were immediately invalidated. Now she didn't have a safe place to wrestle through her experience and what happened anymore. And I feel like that example her sharing that story with me it just expanded my brain, you know? It made me realize how quickly whatever someone's experience is, if I just immediately say, oh, you don't have to feel that way. No, that's not what happened. Whatever. Like, I've immediately closed them off and I'm not a safe place anymore. And they can't be vulnerable with me. I feel like Multnomah has a history of sometimes doing this great and sometimes not doing it great. I feel like all these people who are up here found safe people here at Multnomah to connect with. And I think a lot of people do. But I also think that sometimes people don't. People don't find safe people to be with. And there's places that we have to grow. So my hope out of this chapel that you walk away with is, number one, being a safe person for people to be vulnerable with and to facilitate and foster community. But number two is I hope you walk away with some hope. I hope that you walk away, if you're someone who is feeling like, man, I don't know how I'm going to connect with any of these people. None of them are like me, for whatever reason, whatever the reason is. I hope that you can walk away with some hope that maybe you'll find someone who actually does share some experiences with you that you would have never guessed. But even if you don't, maybe you'll find people who are safe and people who will love you regardless and who will accept you and who will walk with you through this life, even past Multnomah. So I'm just going to pray to close us, if that's okay. Lord Jesus, thank you so much for this time. Thank you for the time that you give us to just sit and reflect with one another, to talk about experiences, to talk about ways that you've met us, and to think about how we can move forward loving others the way that you've loved us. I pray that you would just go with us through the rest of this week, through the rest of this semester, the rest of this year. And Lord, that as we struggle to find connection and meaning and belonging, that you would be building bridges and putting pieces together and leading us along, forming those connections, and ultimately finding you caring for us in ways that we never expected. In Jesus' name, amen. Have a great day.